former British Foreign Secretary, Lord David Owen. Lord Owen, thank you very much indeed for your time. If you don't mind, before we get into details, could you give us your assessment of Brexit as an idea, not the process that the country has been through, not the division that it's created, but the idea of the UK being outside the European Union?
The idea is to regain our decision-making on many, many issues which affect people's lives. You have to remember there was a referendum and it was won, rather surprisingly, but nevertheless won, because people were dissatisfied with being members of the European Union. And I think the reason is that we joined it as a common market, and we had a referendum whether or not to stay in that, and that was overwhelmingly won. And more it became not a common market, but a political union. And that Britain is not prepared to be. We are prepared to be friends with Europe, but we wish to be able to control our own foreign policy, our own currency, and some of the essential decisions which you really value in a democracy. And I think that was the real reason Britain felt, and particularly outside London, that they were no longer in control of their own country. The politicians were effectively mouthing in the House of Commons policy that was really made in Europe.
But you seem to be basing what you say on fact. Do you think that the citizens who voted in the referendum were using more feeling and emotion rather than fact? And one thing that really stands out is the day after the referendum in 2016, the most common search on Google in the UK was, "What is the EU?" Was the referendum for the people who were casting their ballots too much based on emotion rather than logic?
I don't think so. I've been in politics a long time. I represented my constituency where I was actually born for 26 years. I'm not active any longer in the sense of fighting political battles, but I went back to Plymouth, I talked to my constituents, and I was struck by how overwhelming the feeling was that we should leave. And when they came to the vote, they did so by 60-40. Now, Plymouth is a naval port. You know, it's been an international city for years. This is centuries. This is a decision of people outside London that they are prepared even to have a small reduction in their cost of living and in their wealth, their own personal wealth, if it creates again a feeling that the country is making its own decisions. That's what they, in my view, want. In my view, they will get it. And I think that with more effort and energy and a certain dynamism from the government, I think we can, in fact, economically improve our position worldwide.
I'd like to get your opinion on what many people have said has been a breakdown of trust between the electorate and the Parliament. Because for many Leavers, the Parliament has been stifling their desire to leave the European Union since the referendum result. For many Remainers, they feel as if MPs are more concerned about their own jobs, because many MPs have said, actually, I represent a constituency that voted to leave, but personally, I think it's better for the UK to remain. What about that breakdown in trust?
Well, you only have referendums when Parliament is locked, and when Parliament particularly is locked across political parties. And we've not had many in our country. We did, as I say, have one in 75, and that seemed to resolve the issue of Europe for a few decades. But it's come back, and Parliament voted for a referendum. It was in the Conservative Party manifesto. I'm not a Conservative, but that was in their manifesto, somewhat surprisingly. That manifesto gave them a government. Prime Minister Cameron tried to negotiate a better deal out of Europe. He came back with a piece of paper which many people felt was insufficient. And then it went to the people in the referendum, and by a surprisingly large margin in many respects, we decided to go out. And then the parliamentarians couldn't accept the actual reality of their own decision-making. They'd voted for it. They'd even referred the question to an electoral commission, and there had been changes in it. They voted for that. And that is what has been the problem. Parliament has been unable to make its own mind up. The British Parliament is famed for its democratic and its effectiveness, but for 3 years it was a miserable wreck of a parliament. Now, when it went back again to election, you had an overwhelming vote for the party that is most determined to come out, which is the Conservative Party. But they came into power with the votes of many Labour Party members, many Labour Party voters. I mean, I was Foreign Secretary in a Labour government from 1977 to 79. I was in Minister for the Navy, Minister of Health. And all I can tell you is that there are a great many Labour sympathisers who voted to come out of the European Union. And I think European Union faces great problems. You know, I have a house in Greece, and I saw what happened to Greece. Look at the levels of unemployment that followed the global crisis. Look at the problems of the Eurozone. You know, to give up your currency, we stayed out of that, but to give up your currency, which is the end result of a federal Europe, British people do not want a federal Europe. The politicians in Brussels want a federal Europe. The people in Germany, France, have still to make up their minds, but their politicians are pushing them day after day, month after month, year after year towards a federal Europe. And they better wake up to that. If they want that, that's fine. I don't want to break the friendship between France and Germany that's come ever since the war. We tried very hard to make it a threesome, the two of them and us. We can go on doing that, I think, in foreign policy. But I think that it's very difficult to do that as they move ever closer to a very tight economic union. And as for these negotiations on Canada Plus, we were offered that by the Polish person who held the presidency of the European Union for a 5-year period. That seems to be withdrawn in the last few months. At the moment, if they really believe what they're saying in Brussels, then I don't think there will be agreement. I think that will be obvious in the summer, and we will come out in January of next year without an agreement. And I personally face up to that reality. I think it's cutting off your own nose to favour your face, really. I mean, I don't see the point of it. Most trade agreements are mutual benefit. That's what you're after. We trade a lot, they trade a lot with us. They sell more to us than we to them. It would seem to be sensible to come to an agreement of mutual interest. That's what sort of these agreements. We're totally aligned at the moment. It's quite different from negotiating with Canada, which was not aligned. And is the will there? I don't know. Amongst their politicians, I get the feeling they can't make up their mind.
Do you think Boris Johnson is the man to take the country forward post-Brexit? He has said that we will only allow these 11 months for the trade deals that you're talking about. Many people in the European Union, not least the new head of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has said it's almost impossible to do everything that we need to do in 11 months. Is Boris Johnson the right Prime Minister at this time?
Well, they signed up for it. It was mutually agreed in the agreement now before us that it would be done in a year. I think Boris Johnson has the potential to be a very considerable Prime Minister. He was a good Mayor of London for 2 terms. He's got a lot of energy. People like him. They disagree with him. I mean, I am not a Tory. I've never voted Conservative in my life, and I won't start now. But I think that he won an election fair and square with a very substantial majority. He's there for 5 years, and people have got to face it. And there's much more, you know, to relations with Europe than just even trade or finance. We are bound together through NATO. There is no doubt whatever at the moment that France has a bad view of NATO, which I think is rather disappointing from President Macron. Germany does not pay enough into the NATO, and I look forward to strengthening NATO, working closely with Turkey, incidentally. And I've always believed in good relations between Britain and Turkey. I don't think the EU has been honest with Turkey. They had no intention of allowing Turkey to become a full member, almost from the moment that it was first signed. That's the truth. They were not prepared to have free movements of people between Turkey and the rest of the EU. I may be wrong, but my own personal view is that Turkey and Britain will find it easier with Britain outside to form a stable relationship economically, politically and militarily. And I certainly want Turkey to stay in NATO. I think so does America, and I think it's in your interest.
Lord David Owen, thank you so much indeed for joining us on this TRT World Special as we mark the day the UK leaves the European Union. Very much appreciate your time.
It's been